In this episode of the Exploring Information Security podcast, what is security information and event management? Welcome to the Exploring Information Security podcast, where you will learn, explore, and grow your security mindset. I am your host, Timothy D. Block, and in this episode, we'll be exploring what is a SIEM. And with me today to do that is Derek Thomas, a senior information security analyst specializing in log management and SIEM. Derek, how are you?
I'm excellent. How you doing, Tim?
Good. So first question, how do you say SIEM?
That's an extremely funny question because I feel like I've heard so many variations. I call it SIM. Some people call it SIEM. Some people will start really trying to enunciate and SIEM. But I call it SIM, and I think most people I know call it SIM. I don't think it's ever been standardized, though.
Yeah. I was calling it SIEM, and then I got into a SOC, and they were like, "It's SIM." I was like, "Okay, geez." So, and I was trying to standardize with them. So I guess it's kind of whatever. I wonder if it's like one of those things where it's like pop or soda.
I think it is because you listen to some podcasts or some webinars, and you can tell when they'll get to it, and they'll pause for a second and be kind of worried because they're not quite sure, and then they'll spell it out. Or say three different variations. So I say SIM. I hear a lot of people say SIM or SEM. So not a big deal.
Okay. All right. So what is a security information and event management?
I feel like this question is a holy war between different people, but to me it's really just anything that collects and aggregates security data. Some people might say that's just a SIM, an SIM, or an SEM, but really anything that collects and stores security data, and you can have outputs for alerts, for reports, and then also providing searching capability for kind of forensic analysis. That's, in my mind, a SIM. A lot of companies try to differentiate themselves from a SIM, or, oh no, we're SIM next generation, or we're not a SIM at all. But to me, if you're doing log management and taking in security data, that's a SIM.
So what does a next gen SIM look like?
Well, to me, it's just something that takes in log data and does even better analysis. But you'll see things like, well, we do security analytics, and we do cloud security data science, and we do operational intelligence. When I look at those, they're still taking in security data. They're still outputting security data for alerts and for reportings and for investigations. So it all comes back to basic standard outputs to kind of drive security value and visibility into your network.
So what are some of the SIMs out there available, whether free or commercial?
So you take a look at the Gartner Quadrant, and that'll show most of the SIMs are on the market. I've worked with QRadar, I've worked with ArcSight. Those are kind of the two big ones. There's McAfee Nitro, Alien Vault, or some other ones I know people that have worked with. And there's tons that claim to be SIMs. They'll do some portion of log collection and security data collection. I think those are kind of major players. There's some good free ones out there, and you kind of hear about a lot of people who will roll their own, work with, I believe, Alien Vault with OSIM or Awesome. That's another one I don't know how to pronounce. But, I've heard that 5 different ways. But Alien Vault's OSIM. And then I hear a lot of people kind of going to the Elk stack with Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana.
Yeah, and that's like a free, something you can kind of just do on a low budget.
Yeah, so it's all open source software. You can install it on a server. You can test it out on a relatively low resource server. But for enterprise deployments, you probably need some beefy hardware. But yeah, it can collect logs from most data sources. It's highly documented. and a lot of people effectively use it, and including some very large organizations.
Okay, so how does one use a SIM?
Oh, there's a lot of reasons people use a SIM, so I think that's one of the most difficult questions and things to do when it comes to security monitoring. But I think really just defining your goals. I think in my experience, goals are for forensic analysis. So you store all your data, you can review if an incident comes up, and you can take a look back in time and see if there's anything else going on or the extent of a breach. General visibility into your infrastructure. See a lot of operations people use a SIM for determining whether firewall rules are correctly implemented. Kind of that classic finger pointing between server admins and network admins. The firewalls are blocking it, or your application's incorrectly configured. SIM kind of answers those questions pretty easily. Just do a quick search and see if traffic's flowing. And then my favorite really is threat detection, proactive monitoring, kind of getting alerted and creating alerts on high-value security events. Classic one is someone clearing your logs, or somebody logging in from a foreign country at when you really don't do business over there. But really, it comes down to defining your goals and your use cases, and implementing those within your means.
So and so this can be used for more than just security then. So this also can, and I've seen this within the SIM that I work, is that there's like policy violation stuff, and just I think security and policy violation. Is there anything else that can be used for? Because I don't know. I guess just speak to how it's other use cases other than just being a security device. Because I think it's getting at visibility into your network and figuring out what's going on, which can actually be useful for a lot of other departments.
Yeah, for sure. The in my past, the pure networking departments, they would use it constantly. Probably used it more than anybody for taking a look at firewall logs. And with firewall logs, you can see if access is being blocked, if access is being allowed, and that's an easy way instead of logging into each firewall along the way in a highly segregated environment. That can take some time from my experience. They easily just run a search and look at the source and destination, see if anybody blocked it along the way. Also, compliance. Some people kind of remove that from the security, say it's a little bit different. So there's a lot of compliance activities that are solved by the SIM. So taking a look at users added and removed from security groups, disabling users, things like that, providing proof for a lot of your typical compliance activities are easily solved with the data out of a SIM.
Okay, so that actually sounds like a lot of use cases. What are some of the biggest challenges using a SIM?
Well, there's a lot of challenges. Number one is a skill set. To effectively, I think, use a SIM, you got to kind of have a wide array of knowledge. A lot of people come in with a pure networking, or a lot of people come in with pure server administration knowledge. And you can be very useful, but it's very difficult unless you understand networking and operating systems. So having just kind of basic fundamental skills are probably one of the biggest challenges. The other one is just developing use cases. Why do we have this? What are we going to get alerted on? Out of the box, it'll come with basic alerts, but a fundamental ongoing project should be developing use cases, testing your use cases, and ensuring they're working properly. What does your company care about, and are we going to really stop attacks? Are we detecting incidents? So those are things that are very difficult. It's hard to gain experience, because gaining experience often means you've seen incidents occur. So that's not a lot of people have had that. I say privilege. I guess depends on your position, but to have seen that type of activity. The other way would be kind of getting penetration tests, but really just defining your use cases and following through is the hardest thing to do. That'll also solve most problems from my experiences with a SIM and most of the gripes I hear about it.
Yeah, and I could speak to that as well with the skills. I think that's very important and very interesting because I had a broad background, but I was kind of thought that you just need like straight like a lot of networking experience. But I'm finding that my experience just working within IT in general, even going down, I've had a big interest in web application security. I think that and getting having some experience within that has really helped with using the SIM and investigating incidents.
Absolutely, and that's actually another area that a lot of people don't have skills in, and I'm maybe even weaker in. But yeah, that's a lot of the attacks coming through are through web-based technologies, and monitoring that and determining what's normal, what's not normal is extremely helpful. So I kind of came at it from an attacker's point of view. I'd always wanted to be a penetration tester, so I'm always thinking from an attacker's perspective and what type of logs are going to be left behind. So that's kind of where that my experience has helped there, but not everybody has that background.
Yeah, so this using a SIM is not something that you're going to be necessarily wanting to use right out of college.
No, it can be fairly difficult, and one of the hard parts too is you can't. It's difficult to learn on your own. So you come out of college, you can set up labs, you can run attacks, but it's very difficult to set up 1,000 workstations and 200 servers, and to see what type of data you're going to get from that.
Okay, so how do you tune a SIM? Because I think that's something we haven't touched on. That's very important for using it effectively.
Yeah, so tuning is probably the number one difficult, probably the most difficult part of using a SIM. To me, it all comes back to the use case. You can't really tune anything unless you have a strong use case. So defining what you want. So, for example, out of the box, you come in with a lot of login failure type of alerts, right? So, what value is that gonna play in your organization? And so, what type of tuning activities you're going to perform depends on your organization. So, login failures come from things like service accounts. So, determining operational issues would be part of the use case. So, are you going to tune out potential login failures from your service accounts? Are you going to tune out? So, it really all comes just to the use case. And every use case tuning is really different. So, for example, you might see login failures coming from your domain controller, but your domain controller will generate a lot of login failures. So, if you have a rule that states 5 login failures in 5 minutes, then that's going to trigger a lot. And you would tune that out by something along the lines of, not having that rule trigger when the source is its domain controller, because that'll happen quite frequently.
So, what resources would you recommend for someone trying to learn more about SIM tuning or just implementing it?
So number one is read the documentation. I've performed SIM implementations for a number of customers, and I'll come back and they'll ask, they'll have basic issues with implementation, like how do I get the logs into the SIM? It's all defined within your documentation.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm laughing because I feel like I'm beat. I've beaten the documentation. Go to the documentation. It's actually a lot of it nowadays is written pretty well. And I've been through the SIM that we have at my work, and it's plain there. It's got it, and it's got documentation for just about every single thing that you want to grab log sources from.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ton of documents, so it can be time consuming, but there's nothing more valuable than that. So there's several books. Applied Network Security Monitoring was one that I really liked. Really liked one called Network Forensics, which covers networking, covers Windows events. That's at a high level type of investigations you could perform in your SIM and log management. Also, a type of incidents that may occur in your environment and things to look for. Probably one of the best is people in the industry. Just talking with them, what has worked for them and what hasn't worked for them has been invaluable to myself. And like I keep saying, generating new use cases. Someone told me once, when I first started, we don't do business with anybody outside the country, so we look for login failures to our remote access from foreign countries. Turn it on, bam, we're getting lit up with logins from the Netherlands, from Italy, all within the same user within a short period of time. It was impossible to occur. I'm like, wow, that's awesome. I wish I would have known that a long time ago. So just talking with people and finding out what worked for them is the best thing you can do.
Yeah, we were actually at DerbyCon together, and we sat in one talk, and you asked a question, and then you told me while we were talking before this interview that you actually were able to implement some of the guy's stuff.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So another resource I like is I check out a lot of webinars. There's a lot of webinars online. A lot of them are kind of vendor-y, so they may not provide a ton of content, but I really like the stuff from Ultimate Window Security. They provide some definite use cases that are easily implemented, and they seem to be referenced in a lot of the presentations that I go out and watch. So
is a SIEM a one-man team, or is this something that needs to be handled by multiple people?
Well, it really depends on the size of your organization, the amount of use cases, and the quantity of log sources. But most likely, if you're purchasing an enterprise SIEM, it'll be more than one person. I always find many people want to get into it. Once people hear about it, they say, they know that you're aggregating data from all kinds of log sources. All of a sudden, people come out of the woodwork, and you're kind of a data broker. So there'll be a lot of people who want to get in on it. But I think probably a 1 or 2 man team. I like to kind of break it out into the operational aspects of a SIEM, like kind of the care and feeding. A lot of server network administrative professionals are very good at that, ensuring things like it stays up and online, or that you're not going over your licensing, or just working with other departments to add log sources and data. And then kind of the other half would be your analysis, your incident investigations, coming up with new content, new use cases, new things to look for, new rules that might detect an incident.
So one of the things I guess you could say, I don't know if I would say struggling with, because there seems to be some training out there, but is there any SIEM training that people can pay for that you would recommend for using it better?
That's something I've looked into, and I haven't found anything in that space. I feel like there's a lot of training that will aid you, but nothing directly related. So I think the OSCP was one of my best things. Taking that training and kind of realizing how attackers view the network and how they'll traverse your network is by far, I think, the best value. Network forensics training is very, very valuable as well, because most of the SIEMs out there incorporate some sort of network component, and they're starting to add a lot more forensics capabilities, either actively querying workstations or just storing large quantity of network data. So I think those two areas are very important. And then just kind of fundamental operating system knowledge, learning what type of logs are generated, things like that.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to mention that we haven't already talked about?
No, just focusing on creating your use cases is probably the best thing you can do. And knowing what data to collect, what data's out there, how to get it into your SIEM, how not to send too much data to your SIEM. Those are things that will prove invaluable throughout the project.
Okay, so how do you tell, or how do you know if you're sending too much, or what is too much?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's two thoughts on this matter. It's output-driven logging and input-driven logging. So, input-driven logging is just send everything to your logger. You may need the data at some point, and some people fall under that camp of thinking. So, it's better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it. But that'll overwhelm your loggers. So, you can usually you'll start receiving alerts from your SIEM saying you're going over your event rates, you're blowing out your license, Your storage is running out, things like that. So there's also an input-driven logging methodology, and that's what type of data is needed for your use cases, and only sending that data. When you need more data because you develop a new use case, then you configure that data to be sent to your logger. So they'll send far less data, but it's very exact in why it's there and what it's used for.
Okay. So I think we've got the point across that use cases are very important for utilizing a SIEM.
Yeah, did I mention that enough, or I don't know?
No, I like it. I think that's something just in security in general is something that needs to be defined a little bit more as use case. And it's for SIEM, it sounds even more important because it sounds like, especially when you're talking about overwhelming, and yes, you're overwhelming the appliance and your licenses and stuff. And I think that can often be overlooked because I think a lot of people have the mindset of, it's a lot like the NSA. Let's collect everything. And oh, wait, we're missing this and that. And, we just want to collect everything for SIA, cover your ass.
Oh, absolutely. But, I sometimes find a middle ground is best. There's a lot of documentation out there in your audit settings. If you take a look at the CIS benchmarks, they'll benchmark pretty much every technology out there and their best practice logging settings to send. And those are usually pretty good. They don't turn everything on. So you're at that kind of middle ground of you're not generating too much data, but you're collecting data that's useful. Mm-hmm. So that's very important.
Okay. Well, is there anything what would you like to plug?
Oh, I just always plug MySec. I'm an active member of Michigan Security here in the Detroit area, so probably see some shirts around at the conferences. You can catch me on Twitter at DTOM, DTH0M. If you got any questions, shoot me a tweet anytime. You might see me arguing on LinkedIn about SIEM next generation or log management versus whatever, but ask me anything.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining me to discuss what is a SIEM.
No, thank you for having me.
And that will do it. Hopefully you learned something. If you didn't, drop me a line on Twitter at TimothyDBlock or email me at timothy.dblock@gmail.com and let me know what you didn't learn, and we'll try to cover it in a future podcast. Show notes can be found at timothydblock.com/EIS. If you enjoyed the show, share it with others and rate it on iTunes so it can reach others trying to explore information security. Have a good one.